But I wonder. So like I can ask any question and I get like a whole room full of just stares, even if I'm just asking their opinion. So I took this assignment of like, and also just something that happened to me. I'm just finishing up, like we have winter break now, of like my students saying, oh, hi, Shani, sorry. But saying like, I said, what would you want to learn if you could learn anything in Tanakh or in Judaics or whatever? And they all said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And I said, is it because you don't know what there is to learn, or because you're just not really interested in like Tanakh learning? So you're like, whatever. And they said, it's like kind of both. And after all these years teaching, I haven't had it till this year, like whole classes almost of like kids who are like, I don't know. I don't know anything else. And I don't really know what you're teaching me. And so it's a real struggle that I've been having. So that's how I based my class on.
Just to validate you, Gabby, I will say that my hardest years teaching, and like really like 2 years ago, I was like almost like being driven to quit and just deep done, was a class that was so apathetic and low energy. And I felt like I taught them in second grade and then I taught them again in sixth grade. And both times I would say to them, I feel like I'm talking to a wall. Like I would literally just talking to the walls of the classroom. And it's like I feel like behavior you can, like, okay, sometimes you have like a really hard behavioral like situation in class with a student, but when there's apathy and like no dynamic in the classroom,
Crushes
it's
your
so
neshama.
draining. It's so draining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I already like met with the head of school and she validated it because I was like, I'm teaching 20 years. I just moved to this new school and I think I am the worst person or the worst teacher and I should just
Yeah.
quit. It's either like what a waste of my time, but also like obviously maybe I'm
Like
not
you feel
good.
like you're not
You
the right
don't
match
know
for
what a
them
waste of your
also.
time. Many years later, you might hear, because I also feel like this. And then 5 years later, another teacher said to me, she goes to me, Chava, you're never going to believe it. I was teaching in a classroom, I was teaching this. And she goes, and the girl said, hey, do you remember Mrs. Woody taught us this? She phoned me up. She goes, I just want you to hear that they remembered. And it was, do you know what I mean? It really gave me a lot of chizuk.
I felt
Yeah.
that way once as a substitute. I took a semester as a substitute, and then somebody remembers something I taught as a substitute, and then I felt
Wow,
so
that's
never
impressive.
like
Avital, you must have been a superpower.
Shani, your camera's very unclear. I'm just saying.
I know. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, let me try 1 second. Okay.
Maybe rub it with a cloth. Oh, no, good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's pretty good.
Yes. Okay. But
Honey, you're in the wedding colors already.
yes. So you ready for this? Meira chose hunter green and Talia chose like apple green. So
Oh my.
I know.
It's a good color on you.
In England, you don't really have people do wedding colors. Thank God.
I'm all for that because it's really annoying.
So when my son married a girl from England and we told them the colors, that's right. So they came in all different. It's just exactly. We learned, which was nice. Nice, exactly. These are shtuyot. Baruch Hashem. Binyan batim ba'am Yisrael. Okay, this is so nice, like coming into your conversations, which I love. I think it's wonderful that you get a chance to. Also, I think as teachers, we need not only that professional development, but we need that support group. So, kol hakavod. And happy birthday, Tirza. Is today your birthday?
It is her English birthday. Her Hebrew birthday is Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh, beautiful.
And Nishma Besaras Tovas.
Yes, I love that.
Amen. She's going to have to give us a birthday bracha.
Yeah.
Tirza, can you give us a birthday bracha now?
Want to give a birthday bracha? No.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start. Chava's going first, and I'm taking literally old-fashioned notes over here, again, on index cards. Again, as if I'm a student in your class, again, taking notes. Now you're going to see something very interesting, and that is that these are intentional tangents. This is when exactly that generally students don't take notes, which is wonderful because you have an opportunity through exactly what Chava is doing right now, through being able to impact us in a way where all of our senses are really focused on you. So again, ignore the fact, like you should pretend that I'm not taking notes. I do want to comment though thereafter. So, okay, how about all yours?
Yeah, I'm just going to put the hand out. Oh, 1 second. I'm just going to find where I am. Chat. Okay, I'm going to put a handout in a sheet, but it will be on the, I made a little PowerPoint to make it quicker for me, because obviously we're not all teaching, we're just going to do like a quickie. So I'm going to do it like this, okay? Can you
Excellent.
see my screen?
Yes, beautiful.
Okay. Because I've decided if I'm going to make this effort, it's going to be something that I'm going to teach. So I spent a bit more time than I would have otherwise.
That's
So
what I have. And
I'm teaching upper end high school, I 17, 18-year-olds, or people who are post-SEM. So there's like a girls learning group. It's just a bit weird how I'm going to bring this in because it's Koheles, but you'll see it'll tie into any time, especially unfortunately now. So I thought the first thing I'd do is I would give some work, but at the same time, I'm not going to play it for you now, but I've chosen Perek Gimel, La Kal's Mamba Ace. That's what I've chosen, and I'll explain to you my intentional tangent in a minute. So I'm going to give them some work, and at the same time, I quite like this that there's, if people know the Silver Zemesh song, I'm happy to send it all to you so you can all, if you want to listen to the things later, or even the song, there's an English song called Turn Turn, which I understand the guy gives the money, gives the royalties every year to a tzedakah in Israel because he feels he's taken the words from Tanakh. How cool is that? Courtesy of Erica Brown's book. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do in my class is have this picture. Obviously, it's got time in it, and also it's got London in it. So, and you're supposed to spot the difference. Okay, that's the first thing, because in high school, we always like that sort of thing if it would be a high school class. And then I'm going to give out a sheet like this, which is in the handout. It comes out like this. I don't know why when it's on PowerPoint, but it comes out like this. Just 1 second. I think what I'm going to do you think if it's recorded, it's going to come out with my face or Shani's face? Let me see. I'll pin myself.
It always,
I pin
what
myself.
it does
Spotlight
when it's
myself.
recorded is if it's a share screen, it's on the share screen. And then if you're speaking,
Okay.
you're like a square in the corner.
Okay, so this is the brief that I'm going to give the students, whoever they are. So they can either work by themselves or in pairs, and they have to look at the words. And I've basically taken the Pesukim and I put Eis Loledes for Eis Lamus. So I've literally just spit it up like that. It's just so that I would like everybody to look in pairs as an exercise and look at the two things. And are they opposites? Are those the opposites that you would have chosen? What can you see? What patterns can you see? What patterns? Where are the exceptions to the patterns? Anything that you can see of interest, or can you relate the things that are together in the same posuk? That's where I would start, because I would like at all times the students to bother to look at the words in order that before we move on to see that. So obviously that's going to take a lot of time, and my intentional tangent, I can send everybody what I've read up about this and what I one day will teach about this, but I'm going to talk about the intentional tangent. I know it will take too long for everybody. And my intentional tangent is going to be about mental health awareness, and that sometimes people are at a time where they're crying, and sometimes people are at a time where they're laughing. And what makes you cry today might make you laugh tomorrow, or, you know, okay, things can change, you know, like what you thought was the best thing, you know, I want this place in university, maybe you're upset about it, and then later on it becomes the worst thing. But I would like to talk about mental health awareness and about the fact that it's okay not to be okay. And if sometimes you're going through a hard time, or if sometimes someone is telling you that they're going through a hard time, to listen, to be self-aware and be aware of the other. And I'm not going to play it, but for people who know, there's a book called I Had a Black Dog, and there's the YouTube clip. I'm happy to send this out and everybody can watch it if they want to. If you haven't watched this video, you have to watch it. It's about depression and mental health awareness. It's so moving for me. I'm not going to show it now, but if anybody hasn't seen it, they should watch that clip about teaching other people what it feels like for another person who's going through depression. And then I've collected some resources for things in England, and in fact Parshas Bo, because they always tie in. I don't know whether it's worldwide, but in England they do Parshas Bo. There's an organization called Jamie, which is to do with mental health awareness because of the Choshech, and they say that there were 3 thick days of darkness, so they always have it. And they have fascinating resources. And if you want to see this, where it says here, Rabbi Daniel Epstein and Jamie wrote this pamphlet about mental health awareness with Jewish using the Torah and, you know, Jewish sources, and there are loads. A lot of these are English resources, but I'm sure there's lots of things that people, if you ever want to have these resources, there's loads of them, and some of them are Jewish and some of them are not Jewish. For example, this Kuth and Papyrus are things that are in the local area, nothing to do with Judaism. It's just, you know, and because I'm in charge of this website, I've made a whole resources. I made a whole resource pack over here of things. So obviously that has to be said very sensitively, and I'm just saying it to you like you know, very fast, because I don't want to take too long. And then I'd like to talk about how I would take the lesson on from there, and thinking about the terrible, terrible situation that we are currently in the world, focusing on Israel and how people can cope with happiness and sadness at the same time. How do we manage that? Let's say next week or the week after, I've got a friend making a wedding. How do we go to a wedding and dance at a wedding at the same time as I know that my friend's son is in hospital because he was wounded, and he's called light wounded, but he can't even walk, and every day he has to have an operation to take the shrapnel out of his legs so his legs don't become infected. And it's like, how can I sit there at that wedding? How can I balance those two things in my mind? And actually, I was in Boca, which is really interesting because Atara spoke about Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. And my daughter lives in Boca, very near the shul, and I didn't have a car. So the only place I really went to was the shul. And so I managed to go to the Parsha Shir when I was there. But I was actually in America, in Boca, on Simchas Torah, which in fact was the day when we read Koheles, because for us it wasn't Simchas Torah. So I was just kept thinking about how all these things are sort of like coming together just because I was thinking about it. And Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg said something, and going back to the chart that I had before, which I'm going to just do that 1 second. Okay, one of the things you can see on the chart, it says, this is one of the things, oops, 1 second, I don't think I can do this because, 1 second, I might have to do it this way. When it comes to Ace Sefod, but Ace Rakod, it doesn't say Ace Lispod, and it doesn't say Ace Lirkod, and it doesn't say for the bottom Ace Milchama, Ace Shalom. And I was hoping, I tried to set it up in a way that people would notice that Ace is not Ace Lahilachem. It doesn't say that. And I actually asked Rabbi Goldberg, I emailed him, he replied, and he said he doesn't know where he heard it. So if anybody knows where this source comes from, I think it's really moving. He says, as Jewish people, we have to be, by very nature of the way we live, we have to do Sefod and Rakod at the same time, because we're always grappling with sadness and eulogizing, and unfortunately right now we're doing a lot of that, but we still have to find it within ourselves to do the Rakod at the same time. And even when we're in a time of milchama, which our hope has to always be shalom, and we have to aim for shalom and try and be in a state of shalom. And that really resonated with me when I was sitting there, and when I left, because I was by myself, after Simchas Torah, my family left. I was just with my daughter and the baby. My daughter was busy with her own kids, and I was by myself, and I stayed up all night looking after the baby, and I had a lot of time to think. And I was like, you know, when I go, how can I even do nice things? I can't. How can I do that? Especially straight after. It was like, because I was there on Simchas Torah, and then I was there for a week. And I remember thinking when I came home, I don't even want to go to the shops and buy things, you know? I don't mean food, I'm just saying anything. I just like, how can I live like that? It was just, and then I was thinking about, in fact, I was discussing with Shoshana, she's not on yet, but she reminded me about Aaron HaKohen. He lost his sons, Nadav and Avihu, and he had to get up and do the avodah, besimcha, and vayidom Aaron. I just thought that was like, that's a whole other tangent as well. And then I also heard, and I'm not going to show you the videos, but I'll send you the links, Rachel Goldberg Polin, who spoke about how can she feel joy. And she said, I can't, it's been like nearly 90 days. There's a video of her saying it was 86 days or something. She goes, I can't have joy. She goes, I realized nothing makes me happy. I cannot be happy. I'm living all the time with unhappiness. I can't. And she said, and I close my eyes and I imagine my son getting married, and I imagine my son having children. And I have joy when the other hostages are released. That's my only joy. And I'm like thinking to myself, she's living in this, she wants to have joy. We all want to have joy. We want to have some sort of happiness. And it's very, very hard. And to be honest, there's lots of psukim and koheles which make you think, like, what's the point of the world? And you sort of think, well, I don't know, what is the point of this? What's the point of me being here? And a lot of, I don't want to say depression and negative doubt spiral, but then you see the bravery and the courage of someone like Rachel Goldberg. And the other person is the Rav Mizrahi, Rav Doron Perez, and if I'll show you where it isn't exactly where on the video, so I'll send it all so that people want to watch it. He said that for those people who are unaware, I'm sure a lot of you know, that his son Daniel went missing. He went missing, so they still don't know where he is. It's just the most terrible thing. And he was in a tank, but his other son, Jonathan, wanted to get married, and he'd been shot, and they wanted him to get married, and it's like they couldn't decide what to do. How are they gonna do this? And they did get married, and it must have been, he said something like that, as a Jew you have to do that, even though we're in this terrible, terrible state of, and he's lost his son. He doesn't even know where he is. It's like almost no closure. That not almost, that is terrible. He literally doesn't know the fate of his child, just doesn't know, and he still managed to find it within himself at the time of Safod to find the courage and the strength to do Rakod. And I think that is generally something that we have to all balance in different ways. Obviously for him and Rachel Goldberg Polin, it's just really, really difficult. And I kept thinking about that, to finish in a more positive way. I would think about the Eshkel Lamed Zayin, where we talk about, Eshkel talks about the prophecy of the dry bones, Va'ovda tikvatenu, okay, the dry bones. And then I think about the Hatikva, and we say, Od lo avda tikvatenu, Hatikva bashnot alpayim. And we have to, I think that we have to finish with no negativity, rather hope. But I found this amazing thing when I Googled Ace Safod Ace Rakod. I found this picture on the internet, which I can send you the link to. It's like a girl getting dressed for her wedding, and then there's someone who's sort of like looking like they're weeping in the corner. It's like an Israeli artist. Let me just remember her name, because I don't like not crediting people. 1 second, let me see if I can find it. Her name is Tamar Young. Okay, so again, literally, I just Googled Ace Safod Ace Rakod, that came up. And then I just thought I'd finish off with this, which is an English painting. It's a painting in England in a stately country home that I saw in the summer, about 2 hours drive away from where I live. And this is like where I think Barack Obama got the title of his book, Hope. And it's a picture of someone who's a blind woman who's playing a harp with one string. And I think that all of us are struggling with different things, and realize that definitely mental health awareness is very, very important, but we've got to always think about hope, and think even this blind person who's pictured in this picture is still trying with one string and lost her sight to make music. And I think we've got to find opportunities in our lives to do Rakod.
Wow, Chava, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I'm going to start. I hope it's okay. I'm going to limit the responses also, just so that we have time to continue. I loved meaning this. I think was a very, I'm going to say a creative and challenging exercise, because I'm sure that as all of us heard how you created mental health awareness as an intentional tangent, I think all of us were thinking as teachers, how would we do it, right? And it's remarkable how specific and how, I'm going to say subjective this is, right? I wouldn't have thought to necessarily use this, meaning I know when I'm up to Paragimel, as you already know, certain tangents that I go off on, and I love that you incorporated that there. I also love that on your list, your worksheet, that it was all in Hebrew, and to challenge them to know those words in Hebrew. So kol hakavod, instead of just giving them the crutch of English, especially because they're 17, 18-year-olds. Also, it's interesting, when you first said mental health awareness, I was thinking, why is she connecting that to Kohelet Gimel, if after all, it's these are all normal sentiments, these are responses to nature. And I loved what you were saying. And I think that it is important, though, to define it before you continue speaking about it, because when we think of mental health awareness, I'll just share with you, usually people think about it as, okay, someone suffering from depression, someone who suffers from bipolar, or someone who, meaning different mental health diseases. And it's important for us to recognize and be sensitive to these mental health, I'm going to say, really phenomena. What you were saying, which was brilliant, which was, no, we all have to think about mental health, meaning there's healthy mental awareness in the sense of sometimes I have a good day, sometimes I have a bad day, meaning just being even mindful of my emotions is part of mental health awareness. And I think we don't think about that often, meaning there, even Jamie, meaning it's used to sensitize people to those that are chronic sufferers of mental health diseases. But being aware of mental health is even my own mental health. Okay, what am I feeling right now? And is something off with me? So I think that's important to, again, to not just normalize it. In order to normalize it, you have to qualify it. So to really, when you say mental health awareness, just explain what you mean by that. And I would also distinguish between those that have a certain mental health conditions, right? Because then you went back to, okay, we all experience SPOD and RECODE, and then, for example, you know, Rabbi Perez and Rachel Polin, they're all also in a very, I'm going to say, we're living, everyone today in Eretz Yisrael keeps saying, there's no normal, meaning, you know, I go back to October 7th, it was Olam v'hipucho, meaning this is not normal, right? We're not supposed to be living thinking about dying every moment, or our children dying. And that's what's going on right now. And at the same time, I love how you brought it in, and to recognize that, okay, there's, you know, a certain spectrum, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. And there are certain times that we are going to be more in a 8, 8 live code. And there are times that we're going to be in that sifod together with Recode. We're going to go to that mamash, we're going to go to that funeral, and we're going to go to that wedding. And sometimes we can't go to that wedding because we went to that funeral. And that's also okay. And that's when there are feelings of hope that you can incorporate together with it, meaning sometimes it's really difficult. I'm just going to share with you the night of, you know, Tamir Granod is a colleague, and when they buried their son and we went to Har Herzl, I had a close friend's wedding that night. It was supposed to be a few nights later, but her son got off from the army just for those hours. And I couldn't pick myself up after that levaya to go to that wedding, which surprised me and my kids. I came home and I literally collapsed on the bed. It was one of the first funerals, and someone that we knew, and this young, beautiful boy who had just gotten engaged 2 weeks earlier. And my kid said, come on, Ima, come on, we know you. Just like put on, I was wearing regular shoes, put on your Shabbat shoes and you'll already feel better. And that was it. And I tell them, I can't, like now's not the time to feel better. And instead I went to the Sheva Brachos the night after and apologized to this close friends who it was also, we could have, you know, more than 50 people. So, but it's a terrible feeling that sometimes you just can't, meaning people who are suffering from depression, you tell them, come on, get out of it. Sometimes they just can't. And it's important to know that there are other sentiments that we have to be able to incorporate. You may not be able to get up and dance, but you can feel hope. You can feel, you know, just like Rachel said, you can't feel joy, but you can feel some level of happiness when she hears others. You know, she can feel a sense of comfort, you know, or longing, whatever it may be. So I think just to really, obviously, if you had more time, you would elaborate more, but I think it's so important when it comes to mental health conditions and mindfulness that we understand differences along the spectrum. And especially if they're 17, 18-year-olds, you can talk to them about the spectrum. And especially if you want to heighten awareness and sensitivity, then it's not just about personally coping. It's also about knowing when to help other people, right? If your friend you see is expressing certain symptoms, and I think to bring it back into Kohelet in that regard. And we'll see how it actually does fit in beautifully, even to the response to Paragamol. So Chava Kol HaKavod. Any other comments before we go on to everyone else?
I'll send it so people can write it. But I have to say that when I did it, I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know enough about it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it and doing research. But I did decide that I am going to challenge myself and teach it. And that's why I spent like longer in inverted commas, because if I'm going to teach it, I need to spend more time, you know. So I thought, you know what, if I push myself, I'll
You really should. And I think every teacher needs to, a teacher just reached out to me telling me that she thinks one of her students is experiencing depression. So I asked her for some of the symptoms, and she started telling me, and I was thinking, you know, they're not the symptoms of depression is much more mourning, meaning that you're right, teachers need to know this more, and they need to know when to seek professional help. Again, they need to have the basic, not just coping, but pedagogic skills also. So chava kol hakavod, and even for sensitizing your students, I think that's wonderful. Speaking of which, right, we're all first responders, right, as teachers. I love it, you're 100% right. Ariella, can I bother you? Chava, you're going to send this, and I believe, do we have a Google Drive yet for this year's cohort?
We
a
have, but
Google
not
Drive?
a file for this, but be happy to make a file right now. I just
Wonderful.
wanted to comment that Chava, you're always so masterful, and even from last year, at getting people's attention at the beginning, which a person could totally skim over and focus on that content-rich lesson that you gave. But what I think is great is you start with something simple. Notice the differences. Okay, now that you notice the differences, and everyone, no matter what level, they all notice differences. Okay, now I give you a chart, right? And now one side is this and one side is that. Meaning, I think that no matter who your students are, I think that's just, it's brilliant that you get everyone to feel like I can do this and I'm involved. And once they're already engaged, okay, now they're that much more open to everything else that you're going to be teaching.
You're on mute, Chava. Sorry.
I did teachers training, and the teacher that trained me was like obsessed about this. And so I've done loads of what I call introduction things, whether it's a video of like anything or pictures or games. I told you once I did a thing called, you know, Avram and Noah, like who's a tzaddik, right? So I did like hot water, cold water, and medium water. I'm like, I have to try and think of crazy things, but I think to myself, the students who are in that lesson will never forget that they put their hand in the warm and the cold, and then I said, well, which one was hot? And so it depends where you're coming from, right? And I told you the ice cube thing. So those are some of the classics, but I really try and do something. You know, I did once by Ikra, the big Aleph, so I did a whole math sheet of like measuring with a ruler, stupid like objects, you know. And they were like, why are you doing that? And I was like, okay, now find the big letters this morning. And then I just talk about, and then they really think about it. What was that lesson about? They'll remember more the ruler than anything else, but never mind.
Beautiful, beautiful, brilliant. Okay, Chava, thank you. Thank you. Who's presenting next? Okay, Gabby, all yours. But you're on mute. And it was so nice because I also got to learn Hilchot Muksa with your mother today.
She is having, thank God. I'm so glad she could do this trip. Okay, so my target audience, like I was kind of talking about in the beginning, is my 8th grade class, which I asked them this question, right? If you learn anything, and they all were like, I don't know. They just said they didn't care. And I decided this lesson would be for them. So the goals of this class are, like I thought, to orient them to the book of Kohelet, which I'm assuming they don't know what that is, and to spark their interest to learn like more about it, and a Tanakh skill of like connecting. Okay, so the introduction, or the first thing I would do would be to ask them to go online, and I looked it up. There's a ton of these lists of books that are banned, right? Books that have been banned in history, or books, I think more in history, because when I looked at the ones for just like the most banned books of 2022, then they're all about like mostly LGBTQ issues. And I wanted it to be like a bunch of different things. And then also I feel like the older banned books, they probably have read some of them. So they should look, I can either give them research, or they can just find them themselves. And then they would like kind of go around, they would say, this was a banned book, why was it banned? And then we'd have a discussion, like, which I think even these students, I could pull, like, I feel like even this, they'd be apathetic, but I would pull it out, and I think they would have a little bit of discussion of like, do you agree? Is it okay? Would it be okay to learn it at a certain age, but not at another age? And this is kind of like, I would say it's kind of the intentional tangent of discussing this about, are there topics that we should discuss, that we should never discuss? We should discuss at a certain age. Okay, then I was going to bring up Kohelet with the source from Kohelet Rabbah, that the sages which hide away the book of Kohelet, because maybe there were things in it that were inclined toward heresy. And we'd have to literally, and I feel like this is crazy that this is my 8th grade, but we literally have to find the book of Kohelet in the Tanakh, which is a skill that they cannot do. Many of the students cannot find what we're learning, even though it's the same like parak for, like a week, they cannot find it. So like, we'd have to take like a little bit of a mini lesson of like, here's my Tanakh, it has 3 sections, let me become a little familiar with it, where is Kohelet, and also to talk about like, when we read it, that it comes up, comes up every year, and we read it in Joel. I wanted then to focus on we would look at the first parak, just the beginning, to the phrase, Hevel Havalim Hakol Hevel, and I would give them a little bit of an, just like a summary of if they read it. And for my students, for most of them, they will read it in English. Like, this is a big question. What is the point? Right, we're all going to die anyway. And that this word hevel is found many times. If there's time, like I could have them look for it. Or I could present it. I'm a big fan of that like visual of like, oh, look, like you can do it, with Al HaTorah, where you can put the word and then you could see it highlighted. So they should, which is something I also talked about, like a milah mancha, like, look, this is a focus of the book because we find it so many times. Then I was going to play the Hanan Ben Ari song, Chutz Mikadu Regel, which some of my students are a little familiar with Hanan Ben Ari. I have some like shlichim kids and like Israeli students, and then we would listen to that song. We would look through the lyrics, which you can find. There's a great website. You can find the Hebrew and the English lyrics side to side. And you'd see that this song, like I always feel like this song is about someone who is kind of, sad, right? Like I don't, and what they find enjoyment from is, I don't want to say like mindless. I think I would say it in a nicer way, but like, like something that's just, it's sport. Like everyone is getting, passionate or feels emotional about other things, but I just am like, and sometimes we just all feel that way I think then, leads them to understand what the word hevel means, that it means just, plus the fact that I love that Hanan Ben Ari like takes psukim and he like sticks them in his song. Like, here's the exact phrase that he puts in there, and you can see it in the song. But then I wanted to kind of turn and teach, which I think then they would know this other story about Cain and Hevel, which I think, from Parsha or whatever, and, they're definitely more familiar with Breshit stories and some of Shemot stories, to look at Hevel, who is the first person to die. And he had this, like you might say at first, and this I found in the Jewish Bible Quarterly, a little article, where Hevel is the first person to die, and you might say, oh, look, he's like, that's what it means. It means like, I lived so briefly, and then it was nothing, and I hardly did anything, and that's it. I have no children, so nothing is like, I don't have any kind of legacy, and that's what Hevel is. But then I wanted to, there's like a positive, which I also wanted to, this points, it's like an intentional of having them connect, like, oh, here's this new book, Kohelet, that I'm just learning about, and it has Hevel, but that connects to a story that I'm familiar with because I know from Parsha or whatever, like Cain and Hevel, or I definitely know they were like these two brothers, and oh look, now I am remembering that one of them is named Hevel. But in this article, I can send the link for this as well, and I have it like typed up, but that Hevel is the first human being to offer a sacrifice that God accepts. And not only like this idea of like accepting his gift, but also accepting him, like, God turns to him and his gift. So I felt like it was like a positive ending of like, because I'm kind of wanting to, my goal is to give them like, oh, this book seems like could be interesting, and maybe I'd want to learn more about it. Or when someone says Kohelet, I'll kind of know what it is. But that even though I've presented or we've looked and seen that it seems kind of depressing, that perhaps there's another way to view it, which is look at this guy Hevel, that it's like a connection with Hevel, from Breshit, that even though, yeah, his life was, and maybe our lives too, we might think are this fleeting thing, even if we live till, please God, 120, then, but this idea that he's there and God like turned to him means like, that's really what we should be focusing on about him. That the point is, even in our fleeting lives, to try to do what God wants from us. So, it was an idea, maybe, I don't know, like I was thinking I would present this perhaps when we're reading Kohelet, or maybe like Breshit when we're learning about Cain and Hevel. And I think that's, that Hevel's teaching the exact opposite, right? Like it's a deep message of, we should not just, like, whatever circumstance we have in our life. And I think even in 8th grade, like I always say, like in your own lives, maybe they feel like, what am I doing? I just go to school every day. I don't like it. Am I, or whatever, that there is, substance to everything that they're doing, even though, yes, in the big scheme. So I know that that doesn't delve so much into the deep questions, because when we learn about it and I think about it, I'm like, I come back to whenever we say, oh, but what about this? And then Sean, you say, yes, but then no one will really remember you in like at least 2 generations. And like that whole thing about your great grandparents, like I've totally thought about that, like on my own. So I don't want to really get into that with them. But I do want them to, to realize here's Kohelet, and it's kind of like, oh, it's like a book that's a little shocking and therefore interesting, and maybe I'd want to learn more about it. And for them to realize that there are connections. I always tell them like the whole concept of like, if you know enough Torah, like you're supposed to, like, it's supposed to be like, I learned this, and it should like be a light bulb, like, oh, this connects to this, and this pasuk connects to this. And if we all, I always include myself, like if we all knew all the Torah, like Rashi's assuming that when I read this pasuk, I am like, and I try to give them like examples from themselves. If you said like a famous line from a movie, they're like, right away, they know it. And like, that's how but they don't know it was Torah. So, all right, so that's it.
Wow. Gabby, you just got so many messages in such a short amount of time. That was great, which is why I would even maybe start with how you ended, meaning you said, I'm not sure if this would be an intentional tangent when I would teach Bereshit, when I would teach Hevel, or when I would teach Sukkot, and then talk about Kohelet, or maybe somehow just tie this into, their lives, because it is universally relevant. So I think part of the key of intentional tangents is to think, what is the best context? Meaning, you're right, you could teach all 3. And I even wrote to myself, if you would teach it in Bereshit, I would actually link it more to intertextuality, meaning, isn't it fascinating how Kohelet is then going to serve as a commentary to a certain degree on Hevel, and how Tanakh is so dynamic, because we can look at all the Sfarim and see these ideas coming up, sometimes as a noun, sometimes as a person, sometimes as a verb. And I think that, that's one idea. If you were teaching it as connected to Sukkot, then the focus would be more on the times of the year and reflection, and what is the point, I'm starting there again, right? And it would take more of that turn. And if you were really learning it within the context of Kohelet, then just as you started, then I would say, okay, like, what is the point of the Sefer? So the way that meaning when you think of the messages you want to teach, right? When you start with, I want to make sure that they understand this message, right? The message of Kohelet, which is really, what is the purpose of my life? I want to make sure, even as these very, I'm going to say somewhat, apathetic 8th graders, that they start giving thought to this. So what is the best? What will be the most profound way to teach it? So again, if I'm teaching Sefer Bereshit and I'm not teaching Kohelet, then Bereshit is perfect. If I'm not teaching Bereshit and I'm not teaching Kohelet, then Sukkot time, would be perfect. So to really think, it starts with, I want them to know this, what I'm calling a tangent, but it's really something very important, which is why I'm going to create it as an intentional tangent. And then let me think, what is the most profound and poignant way to do that? So I assume, based on the way that you presented it, that you were going to teach it in the context somehow of Kohelet. Like, okay, we're never going to get to this, but because I really want you to learn this, I'm going to teach you more about, canonization and what Sfarim we're in, what Sfarim we're out, which I think is also important. So you're teaching them, it's more of a general shiur, less philosophically and less even textually inclined. And I love, that's how I thought you were going, because I love your hook, which was, okay, think of banned books. Why would books be banned? And why would they be banned in different time periods? Personally, I've actually done this with students. Give them Dr. Seuss, right? Which I'm still upset about, right? Give them, even though my, Mulberry Street edition now sells for literally $220 on Amazon. So, there are some advantages. But in any case, again, when you give them these books, and, even give a few of them, you can get Catcher in the Rye and and ask each one, like, why, like when you give someone Dr. Seuss, like, why do you think this was banned? And if I give it to, I don't know, a Chinese person, would they think that, it should be banned? So this is, an interesting discussion to have as well, and let them understand that. I love the idea, and Chava did this as well. I think today every teacher has to be familiar with music and song, and it's in the Torah, right? Kitvu lachem et hashira hazot, because it was interesting. Psychologists went around the country in Israel, and I know this has been done, and excellent. I know this has been done in various cultures, and that is to speak to students about, right, how that both what they remember the most and also how they're dealing with different issues, especially philosophical issues. So for example, in Israel, they went around to different communities to see how the Noar is succeeding, like how the youth today is dealing and coping with the tragedies around us. And they found that 90% of the youth answered that what's their pick-me-up, meaning what's their coping mechanism? Music, right? Just music, and meaningful music, meaning that there are words out there, right? There are songs out there that just express their sentiments, which I think is so powerful. And I think it's the same in all, I would say, in Western countries also. So to choose a song, and that's what's so special about song. And really, I mean, you said it yourself about Tanakh, that there are songs that incorporate Tanakh because Tanakh is life, meaning it's not just the Hanan Ben Ari is really cool because he's Dati and he's a song, and you can even choose, the non-Dati, Tomer Greenberg, who also incorporates Psukim because it's life and it's a Torah Chaim. And of course, then, Psukim are going to be quoted in songs in Hebrew because it's an expression of life. And you're 100% right, Gabi, that this way they'll remember it. This way they'll be able to relate to it more, not a question whatsoever. And I loved how, whether you start with Kohelet or you start with Bereshit, that idea of Hevel, and instead taking the positive, right? Hevel, the person whose life really was ephemeral, in the end, he has still a positive legacy, and that is that his korban was accepted. In other words, what lasts is really your relationship with God, right? His relationship with humanity was cut short, but his relationship with God. So that was a very, very powerful way of basically summarizing all of Kohelet through the association with Hevel. So Kol HaKavod, really Kol HaKavod. I think that's brilliant. Brilliant. And just to think, what's the most poignant basis for tangent?
I think it's so interesting when you gave us the projects, because people just do such different things. It's so always so
remarkable. That's a good, Gabi, you're 100% right. And meaning I'm listening to Gabi thinking that is so not, but that's exactly it. Meaning she knows her class, she knows, but to really give thought, meaning the reason I thought they're really intentional. And sometimes, like you all said, these will be what affects your students for the rest of their lives, those intentional tangents. So you want to give thought, what is the best medium? And also what is the best base of the tangent? Meaning if I start teaching you Hevel while I'm talking really about, I don't know, Gulat Mitzrayim, that's not, I have to choose like a good base for, sometimes I tell my students, okay, there's so much that I want to discuss with you. Sometimes I'll remember, oh my, we didn't have a discussion about truth, tolerance, or pluralism. They're like, okay, can we have it now? And I'll say, no, no, we can't have it now because that isn't the base of what we're talking about. I have to link it to something that is going to be even somewhat relevant or a more powerful type of context. So Javi, you're 100% right.
I think that that's so true because this is more of an adult, but I know someone and she is like amazingly genius and has like a photograph of Mary of Tanakh. And when she gives a shiur, it's like, I feel like it's just like everything I know just comes out. And for students, sometimes when they're also like saying like, oh, let's learn this, you get excited. I do because I'm like, oh my gosh, they want to learn something. But I agree that you have to kind of like, be focused. And I just want to say one other thing that I want to thank you for this assignment, even though I was, of course, stressing about it a little bit, but, because it made me feel what my problem with my apathetic students is that sometimes then I feel like, apathetic too. Like, should I spend time preparing so much? And as I was doing this assignment, I was like, you know what I should do? I should do like a course of all the books of the Tanakh with them. Like, and I'm going to talk about it with my Judaic principal, even though we have a curriculum, because just that comment right before break, over break, I've been mulling it over and it's been bothering me so much. Like, how could they not know in 8th grade, like that, even that there's what other books are there, what's out there to learn? And I now feel like excited, which I think is always a good thing. Like, I like to prepare it, and this would maybe be my Kohelet one, and and so it was helpful to me as a little bit of a, I don't know, a chizuk in this roundabout way.
Kol hakavod, kol hakavod. That sounds amazing. Definitely to pursue that. Beautiful. Okay, Abital, I think you're going to be the last one for today. Is that okay? Wait, unless Atara, Shalhevet are like itching. Shira, I know once next week. You're okay? Okay, Abital, all yours.
So I didn't have a chance to prepare as well as I had wanted to, but I'll give you the basic idea, and if I could show a short video to help out there. I don't know if that's good.
I'm so excited to access all the links that you're all sending out.
So the idea that I wanted to, I think this would be for, let's say, a high school class, and I think it would be an intentional, a full class tangent. Some ideas that I was thinking about as you were teaching Kohelet was the idea of looking deeper into what's obvious. And I was very much thinking about parallels between Kohelet and Pirkei Avot, where in Pirkei Avot you have these very obvious musar, a way to live, what is going to make you happy, and all those messages. And Kohelet almost turns it on its head, and to say, wait, does that actually make you happy, or what is the point of that? And two examples that I was very much thinking about was the idea of Ezehu Ashir Hasameach Bechelko, that the idea of feeling rich makes you happy, and Kohelet actually thinks about both those things. Like, is there a point of being rich, and is there a point of being happy? And another idea that I think is very much clear in Pirkei Avot is that ben adam lechavero, the idea of how to make positive relationships and how to make sure that that companionship is good, where we have not judging other people, where we have that's me ma'ani. And in my head, I would like to have, like, charts, or maybe have the kids have those charts from beforehand of comparing like a mission in Pirkei Avot and a pasuk in Kohelet. That is I think that the basic idea. And I think that in order to present this assignment, I would start off with a video, and it's one of these, like, I'm assuming it's Christian, but with a very obvious message, and to ask the students to say, is that really the message, or is there something deeper? Can I combine several things together? So I'll show you the video and then present some of the questions that I might ask. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to. 1 second. Abital, you are now co-host, so you should be able to.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's coming out a little choppy, but yeah.
If not, I'll just. I'm going to just share what the video says. So it's a video of a boy that you saw that seems to be very poor, and he has very ripped shoes. And a bunch of children from the back are laughing at him and making fun of his shoes. And he becomes very, very sad about it. And he goes to like a corner, and he's all by himself. And suddenly he sees another boy sitting on a bench, and it's a very well-dressed boy, and he closes his eyes and prays with all his heart. He says, like, I just wish I was him. I wish I was him. I wish I was him. And suddenly, the screen changes, and suddenly there's a boy sitting on a bench with these brand new shoes, and it's like the face is the poor boy, and he's sitting there and he's so happy because he has these brand new shoes, and a woman comes who seems to love him very much, and she brings his wheelchair, and she says to him, "Are you ready for your walk right now?" And then you see this other boy, the one who had the shoes to begin with, he's jumping with his torn clothes and his torn shoes, and he's just so happy that he's jumping up and down that he can walk. So clear that the message was, kind of be happy with what you have, and not to wish that you were this boy with new shoes because that boy was disabled. And so I think that, that's a very clear, like, message. That one message that I wanted the kids to really understand is who is actually happier in this video. Is it the boy who can walk? Or is it the boy that has these new shoes? And the message that I really wanted them to share, is it the boy who's all alone? Or is it the boy that has somebody that loves them and has this companion? And I think that the idea from Kohelet, of to compare Pirkei Avot and Kohelet, is to look at each obvious message in Pirkei Avot and to think a little bit deeper, that there's a little bit more to just, being happy or being able to walk, that, and there's a little bit more to just having a companionship and not being able to walk, to have that idea of what happiness really is and what a meaningful life really is.
Very powerful. Can I ask you, Avital, what's your base? Meaning, would your starting point be Kohelet, or would your starting point be Pirkei Avot? What are you teaching?
So I think that my starting point would actually be Kohelet, because I think for a high school class, that Pirkei Avot is like memorized, and like, anytime they need to give a Torah, they're going to Pirkei Avot and giving those messages. And Kohelet makes them think a little bit deeper.
Yeah, bam. And would you say that, meaning Pirkei Avot, they're used to, just as you said, that's their go-to, that's their, do you mind if I say it? That's their frum text, right? Meaning, okay, this is what Chazal teaches. So then how would you relate Kohelet to that? Meaning here you showed them the difference and you showed them different ideas in Kohelet. And I love the video idea. And I downloaded and quickly, was playing it just to get a sense of what you were saying. And yes, again, very powerful because you're leaving it with questions. Right, so Kohelet has some ideas that are in Pirkei Avot, and at the same time presents all these other ideas as well. So how would you, meaning if I'm, do you mind if I say this, like a from, I'm just making this up, a from, Maya no, Bruria girl, whatever it is, and okay, and Frisch, whatever it may be, and I'm listening to, to my teacher present the ideas of Kohelet to a certain degree, versus Pirkei Avot. How would you want them to leave? You want them to leave with the questions? What do you want them to leave with?
I don't know if I would want to present it versus Pirkei Avot, or thinking a little bit deeper than Pirkei Avot, not to leave it as a message of Ezehu Asher Samech Bechelko, but to take that message of Ezehu Asher. What does it mean to be Asher, and what does it mean to be Samech? So I don't know. I guess I presented it in the beginning as a comparison, as if each is coming from a different angle. I would almost want to see, even though it's time-wise not right, but to see Kohelet as a commentary to Pirkei Avot.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you know who does? It's really Rashi. Meaning Rashi reads basically the messages of Chazal into Pirkei Avot. And we'll say, okay, and Chazal even do that. Okay, Simcha is sometimes good, sometimes it's Simcha is sometimes bad. And they're saying, let's read it as a running commentary, which I think is beautiful. So now I'm going to ask you, please forgive me, a little focused here for a second. How, meaning this is, on one hand, I'm hearing like a methodology of teaching Kohelet. What's your takeaway tangent? Do you mind that I'm asking? Just to hone it as a teacher. Your takeaway tangent. I'm using this and I'm bringing in Pirkei Avot for them to see it as a commentary, because I really want to teach them. What's my tangent? What's my what's my goal? What am I afraid that if I don't connect it now to Kohelet, that I'm not going to have another context in which to teach them? What do you want to teach them?
So this, I don't know what my tangent really is.
No.
I think that I
I think you do. You just didn't think about it in that phrase. You were saying, Avital, you were saying that you're trying to get the point across to them that there's so much depth that you shouldn't take like a phrase, let's say from Chazal on the surface level, even though the surface level has a lot of meaning to it, and we can find meaning and connect to the meaning of Ezehu Asher Samech Lechalko, and it's a beautiful lesson. But as you're getting older, let's say, as you're in high school and you look at these phrases again, and you're using other texts to then deepen the understanding of wait a minute, like what are these emotions and what are these things? And I think what you're trying to give over was that there's a lot of depth, and you shouldn't just like really be satisfied with saying, oh, I learned that phrase when I was 7 years old and I know what it means, but that there's like continued depth that keeps on evolving as you learn more text, as you learn more commentary, as you get more life experience, and it like changes its meaning and there's more depth to it as you go. Almost like your tangent is like, don't stop learning.
So in a similar vein, I wanted you to say, and I think that this is what you're saying. It's not just the depth and the scope, but the complexity. Meaning
that is what I was thinking. Definitely the complexity, and I think that the one phrase in Pirkei Avot that actually does show that was "Im en ani li mili uksheni la'atzmi ma'ani," and that's like a Kohelet phrase. That is like, which one is it? Like, am I supposed to do things by myself? Or am I supposed to have the companionship? And Kohelet does bring that. Like, companionship could bring jealousy. Like, and companionship has all these like difficulties. And Pirkei Avot says, no. Like, we have chavruta tuta. We have, all these ways to judge somebody favorably, to, mikabel adam b'sefer panim yafot. And there's all these things that companionship is key. But the question of like, then where do I fit in?
beautiful. And Avital, I love this because this is going to be your ongoing tangent. Meaning in Perek Daled, we're going to learn that he does speak about simcha, and then he's going to bring up, wait a second, okay, so great, there's a value in happiness. But what if someone has a chronic disease and they really aren't happy? But then you can argue, wait, but remember the video that I showed you? You can be happy, even if there are, moments of sadness, and, relating a little back to what Chava said. And how about, okay, jealousy? And you're right. Wait, if I learn Pirkei Avos, then asur, and not lo tachmod. No, but Kohelet all of a sudden says, come on, like, can we just be honest? And there is jealousy. So I'd love for there not to be jealousy. And philosophically, it would make sense that there won't be jealousy. But bottom line, there's jealousy. So how do I deal with jealousy?
That also goes back to what Gabby said, to compare it to Hevel and Hanan Ben Ari, the idea that everybody has a Hevel that they're jealous of to death. I always found that very, very meaningful and hard to actually say in words.
Yes, no, so you said it beautifully. You said it's a commentary. And what I want you to see is that this number one, it's such a strong, I'm going to say Kohelet, like Pirkei Avot is just like the certain ideal, and Kohelet is the real. Like, how am I dealing with this? And of course, these are questions that we have, and definitely as teenagers. And number one, the complexity. And just as I said, it really is like a running commentary, meaning this isn't going to be like a one-time tangent. It's going to keep coming back over and over again, which I think is wonderful. And
Can I just say, before Tara, you said that you always want to bring something new into your class. And I think for students to know that teachers don't know everything, and this week I learned something new, and next week I just think that's also, it's not intentional tangent, it's an always tangent.
Beautiful. And I saw Shira wanted to say something before, and I'm sorry, I only saw after.
Oh, no worries. I think that also sometimes you have to be prepared for, when you do this, that it might not go exactly the way, the direction you want it to go in. So like, I know when I teach Yirmiyahu Park Bet, a lot of times I talk about the different relationships we have with Hashem, like the father-son relationship versus like the husband-wife relationship, and which relationship you think is stronger. And it really like, you come in with one like way that you're thinking it's gonna go, and then sometimes my class, and like it's worked before where we've had these conversations and it went one way, and then being prepared for students who come from families where they might not have good relationships, either with a parent or they don't think that their parents have a good relationship, and therefore the way they see those relationships and what's a stronger or a better relationship is completely different. So there, at least it's a little bit easier, but sometimes it can go in a completely different way, and like you don't feel prepared enough to know something. I think that sometimes that's my biggest fear of ever having like one of those discussions, because if it goes somewhere where you don't feel like you know enough, or so I think it's sometimes, I mean, I've been very honest with my students. If it ever happens like that, I'm like, that is so great, and it's not something I thought about, and I'm going to look into that further. But again, I think sometimes you have to be prepared, like as much as you plan, how you want the lesson to go, because it's a tangent. You have to be prepared that students are going to have a very different opinion than what you prepared for.
Beautiful, beautiful, Shira. I'm so happy you made that point. So happy, because Chava alluded to it, meaning here she's going on a mental health awareness tangent because she believes passionately about it. And she believes that it's definitely something that 17, 18, 19-year-olds have to be sensitive to, especially during times where we need the tools to cope with depression. But she herself said she's not an expert, and Chava can guarantee that your tangent is going to go to places where you don't know the answer, right? And just like Shira said, that's wonderful. That I think is the best teaching lesson, which is to be able to say, Lo yadati, right? Like Rashi, to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to research this more, or exactly, now that we see how I'm your teacher, and there are certain things about this topic that I don't know. I just know it's so important, and that's why I've researched this. And I want to make sure that all of you start researching this, and I'll research it more. Chava just said, even before she presents it, she's going to go and research more. And to be able to say that, I can imagine with Gabi and Avital, both of you, that it can lead to discussions about biblical criticism. And wait a second, Kohelet is basically obviating messages that aren't Pirkei Avot. How are we going to deal with this? How do Chazal deal with different sections and different ideas within, within Hashkafa, within Halacha? And this, wow, you just opened up a Pandora's box. Guess what? There are certain Pandora's boxes that are so wonderful to be opened, and someone has to open them. And that doesn't mean you have to close them. And Shira's right. Don't close them, right? Because I don't think they should be closed. But make sure that you have at least the basic confidence, and I'm going to say the basic tools and knowledge to be able to open it. So on that note, wait, first there was, 1 second. Okay, the last chat here. Teachers have to recognize. Oh no. Yeah, teachers have to recognize that we're not mental health professionals. Thank you, but we have to know where to signpost. Beautiful. And teachers and students have to know that we're not experts in philosophy, but we have to know where to signpost. A student should know, and teachers should know that we're not, the experts in every psychological, issue or hashkafic complexity. But we have to, as teachers, we have to be at least sufficiently prepared. That's why it was interesting in hearing that some of you were a little tense about this. And on one hand, I was thinking it's not a difficult assignment, but it is, meaning as soon as you have an intentional tangent, that means that you have to you're out of your comfort zone, right? Because it's not the safer that you're teaching. You're out of your comfort zone, and you have to be sufficiently comfortable and confident in whatever it is that you're choosing to teach beyond that. So kol hakavod. Next week, can we decide on the order? Are we okay with Atara Shalhevet Shira? That's just because that's how you look on the screen right now. Yeah, yes, Mitsuyan.
I'm sure
Okay.
Alison is going to be back. She just couldn't make it today.
Allison next week as well. Nachon. Okay. I want to thank you for getting on a little early. I want to thank you for those wonderful tangents.
Yeah.
A lot of food for thought, definitely for your students, but certainly for us as well. Very creative. I think that we're all thinking. And by the way, notice that it really is very, and I think Abby's was a great example of different ways that I could teach this, right? The same tangent can be linked, and sometimes it can go forwards, backwards within Tanakh, and to try to think of the most powerful, not just medium, but the it's called the jump start, right? The nikudat achiza, that grasping point. Kol hakavod.
I just wanted to say that just what Shira was saying about how sometimes it goes like totally unplanned. Like I don't know if anyone else, Shira, maybe you have this because you also teach like sections probably, but I teach 2 classes that I'm teaching the same thing to. They're not even tracked or anything. It's just 2 5th grade sections. So like literally before recess 1 class, after recess the other class. And one of the challenges that I have is that it's like it's so different because even though I'm teaching the same thing, it's so dependent on the conversation that comes up in each class and the questions that come up in each class. And I, a lot of times, don't even remember which class I said something to, because it's not like I could write a note of like, okay, I got up to Pasuk Aleph in this class and Pasuk Gimel in that class. Because it's like, wait a minute, when we did Pasuk Aleph in that class, this one asked the question about this. So we started talking about like I've like gone to the world map and pulled out like Mesopotamia to show them how, you know, Israel's like in the middle of the trade route of like the old in one class, right? Yeah, right. But like I don't always like, but that's like because of something that comes up. So I think sometimes like it's very hard because a lot of like I consider like my best teaching is sometimes these tangents that we go on, but it's student led. Like it's because of a question that comes up, or it's because of a comment that was made or something like that. And then my other class doesn't necessarily get the same moments.
Tara, I am so happy you said this, because that's the difference between unintentional tangent and
I know.
intentional tangent.
But I feel like my best teaching comes from the unintentional one. So it's like, that's why it's so hard. Like
Yeah.
before you got on, that's what I was saying. Like sometimes it's just like we got on so many unintentional tangents this past week with Parsha. And I felt like I was teaching them such great text skills and thoughts
Excellent.
and just things.
And
But
that's a
what?
great teaching moment. So then what do you realize? You realize that those unintentional tangents should become intentional tangents. And now you're going to have to think, how am I going to somehow teach this in a similar way, right, as a tangent, because sometimes that's more poignant and it's not really related exactly to what we're teaching, to what we're learning right now. How am I going to make that an intentional tangent for the other
Right.
class?
So I think it would have been easy. I mean, this was not the goal of the assignment, but I think it would have been easier, I would assume for all of us, but for sure for me, if the assignment was an intentional tangent based on something that you're actually teaching, as opposed to Kohelet. Because like I'm not teaching Kohelet. So like for me, that was one of the challenges, was like trying to find something in Kohelet that could lead to a meaningful tangent for my audience, as opposed to like taking, let's say, Parsha or taking the Chumash I'm teaching and then thinking about how that would go.
Right. So I did think about that. I just want to say that I didn't do that for 2 reasons. Firstly, because that's exactly the point, an intentional tangent. You should be able to link, like Abby did, to any sefer. Meaning if I think that it's important that they understand the point of life, then great. Either I'll teach it in Bereshit, or I'll teach it in Kohelet, or I'll teach it in Pirkei Avot class, right? Meaning I'll make sure as an intentional tangent that I link it. So Kohelet was really just I'm going to say the excuse and a way of making sure that you feel comfortable with the sefer. Shira.
I want to think, Tara, on that note, a lot of times, this is why I never just reuse my stuff year to year. What I do is a lot of times, like I will make note of conversations and then I try to figure out ways to then make it an intentional tangent when I'm preparing again the following year. So I've found a lot of reflection assignments that like based on a conversation that ended up being really good. And a lot of times I'm always like these reflection assignments, these kids are going to just write whatever. And I don't know how worth it is to spend the period doing it. But then like, I'll read 1 or 2 thinking I'm just going to like give them a grade for actually handing it in. And even this past time, I literally read 52 reflections and wrote back to every single student because I was blown away. It was after Parak that Abiyamayahu also, and I had played for them the Zacharti Lachnu Ayech song for them, and I asked them to all reflect on a time and a relationship where they felt like connected to God, and what was it and how they think they can have that relationship again in times when they are not feeling that connected. And I have to tell you, not one kid wrote this like anything similar, and they were so well done, but it was based off of a different reflection that I had done before. And then I was like, oh, this is a good place to do an intentional tangent and discuss it. So if it ever happens in one class, like just mark it, it does pay to mark it down, and then you can turn it into an intentional one.
Beautiful, beautiful, Shira. I was just thinking as you were talking that I want to take Abby's reference of Chutz Mikatu Regel and see, okay, where would be the best place for me to connect that? Because I think it is a strong message. And where would I take, Abby Tal's video? Because that's a powerful video. And so I could connect it to Kohelet, that's right. Or maybe I can find a stronger, perhaps, I don't know, I'm making this up, a stronger context where, just as you're saying, where they, where I can somehow connect it, because I think that that's an important message. And, so many of Chava's media, where can I use that? It can be Kohelet, or it can be, I don't know, any story in Tanakh of mental health, of which there are many, and connected to that. And I love that idea of connecting memory to Zacharti Lachas et Nurayach. Beautiful, beautiful. A lot to think about. Thank you.
The
Shavuot.
discussions on this Zoom are the best.
I agree.
Yeah, amazing.
Shavuot Tov.
But I feel-
Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov.
what is so